Householder's Bible, it's called. And she's really looking at the revitalization of householding skills, so that we store food, so we make our own clothes, so we take care of our own health at home, so that we build family interaction. And that certainly was the way I was raised a long time ago. And that's meaning home-centered economy. And I think home-centered economy is a real big opportunity, because we can work together to really reduce our needs for cash and to end up with having a life. Maybe not a job, but a life. And so I recommend that you look into Harriet a little bit and hear her story when you read her book, because that's where we're going. I'm also talking about doubling up and tripling up. What we used to call hippie communes. And what were the problems? Gender. Who did the dishes? Who operated the chainsaw? So now we're a little bit further down the road. We learned some things from these early social utopian experiments. And we've really, really improved our gender relations. We've really made some progress here. So everyone gets involved in all the tasks. And everybody knows what everybody else is doing. This is one of Morris Irvin's and other people's observations, is over-specialization is the sign of a society that is coming apart, because nobody really understands what everybody else is doing. And we really should understand everything that it takes to operate a household. And everybody living in that household should be able to do, at least half-assed, every one of those tasks. So that we kind of understand each other, so we understand what's going on. So to return to household economy and home-centered economy is something I can think we can do by design. That would be permaculture design. And it's a way for us to break that atomization and alienization that is the hallmark of modern society, where we're not connected to each other anymore. And we need to have a great deal of heart in this, of building new families, and of coming together and having a great deal of compassion. And that's a little clue, a little aside, but everybody knows I go orthogonal all the time. I have a bear that owns me. I know it's the boss, because every once in a while it comes and takes tribute, collects rent, you know. And I learned from interacting with this bear, and 10 years ago it was just a cub, and now it's quite large, that there's a big difference between compassion and sympathy. If you have compassion, you understand what the situation is, you have heart in it, but you're not off-center. If you're sympathetic, you've just bought into something. You've come off-center. You shouldn't be sympathetic. Think about this some, okay? Help me out with it too. But understand the difference between compassion and sympathy. I think we should become compassionate householders, compassionate family members. And secondly, avoid temptation. Ooh. That's a deep one, actually. In this case, it means the bear tore my cabin down because I didn't take the garbage to town when I should have. And it smelled something, so it tore the cabin down. So avoid temptation. And observe carefully, what did the bear really need? Water. He was actually looking for water, because I live on a desert landscape. Southern Oregon, we had 126 degrees in 2002. I'm trying to scare you. We're having permaculture refugees inundating us in Southern Oregon. Are permaculture refugees moving into any of your other areas? They're like, get on our listserv, and they want to find a place to buy. And they've come from Baltimore or North Carolina. We've got a big rush of permaculture refugees. Now, why was I saying that? See, the bear, water. Thank you. So what I did was I provided water in Zone 3 with clear corridors, penetrating wild corridors. So I provided water, and the bear never again messed with me. And every once in a while comes by and says hello and leaves a little calling card full of manzanita berries. So there's some little clues for your entertainment, and I think that if we were to have this reform conversation and yet still keep ourselves in the observation mode, in the compassion mode, some of the subjects that we may want to be in salon and talking about is the privatization of the commons. This 52% of government land in the state of Oregon is about to be given away to corporations. That's the plan. So, I suggest that we do what that young gentleman who's now in prison did in Utah and outbid the corporations. By forming nonprofits, perhaps we can get oversight on the commons on the federal land. We can start taking care of it, and those are called stewardship contracts. They've actually been worked out to some great degree around forestry issues. Wild iris forestry, a bunch of other... One of the wonderful things that has happened, more history here, is that in the early day, Michael Skeeter and I would go to these conservation conferences, save the old growth. What's another polite way to call them? And they didn't want to see us as permaculturists because we were talking about using the land. Oh my God. Humans make messes. We got to get them off the land. Well, that has totally turned around. And now the conservation organizations are really happy to talk to Native Americans because it was the Native Americans and the permaculturists that were offline, that were sidelined by the conservationists. They did not want to see us. They did not want to talk to us. Now they're really interested in talking to us. And this is a great thing. This is a big sign of progress that we've moved this far. Well, we can move a little bit further by thinking about these stewardship contracts, where we start to be able to have design rights on entire watersheds. And we can have, we can close the road system, and we can put a little village at the gate. In my science fiction novel, which I haven't written yet, I'll detail how wonderful that's going to be. And we will have science support. Because that's another big thing that has changed. When I did my first stewardship contract on roadsides, and the entire federal road system has had an environmental assessment done on what's called the prism of the road. This is from the top of the cut, from the road building operation, to the toe of the fill. This is often like up to 300 yards wide, or 100 feet wide. That's called the prism of the road. All that land is available right now for stewardship contracts. You go down to your local ranger district and you have a little conversation with them. And you take over invasive species control, no more spraying, fuel reduction, and you have the rights to take certain types of materials, which are called floral materials, including herbs, grade stakes, which is like basketry materials, and small poles up to 6 inches in diameter. All these things are already permitted to be taken off of roadsides, and we're not using this opportunity. We've got this opportunity right before us, everywhere on the West Coast, of starting stewardship contracts. Well, when I proposed this stewardship contract to the Forest Service in Ashland, the ranger said, "Where have you been? We've been waiting for you." "Oh, really?" And she said, yes, I'll call my science team. And so a meeting was arranged, and it was the geologists, the fisheries, the silviculturalists, the wildlife people. They all came to the table, and they all said, oh, hi, Tom. Nice to meet you. What are you thinking? And I said, well, I'm thinking this and this and this. And he said, great. We've been thinking the same thing. Similarly, if you're in a land trust, like Acquavecho used to be, you have an oversight committee, which was TIES, Turtle Island Earth Stewards in British Columbia at one time. And they are not policemen. They help you fulfill the covenants of your contract. This is how the government science teams want to start operating. They want to cooperate with us and help us fulfill the ecological imperatives of stewardship. And I really like that, because I think that we can use science support, and we can also introduce it into whole systems thinking, cover a lot more bases. And I think that there's a lot of potential there. And I mentioned some of these other things. So building these stewardship contracts, even on a state level, and especially right away practicing with these roadside contracts, seems to me to be an opening that gets us moving in the direction I was speaking about earlier of becoming nomadic eco-stewards. And my image is that during the spring, summer, and fall, we're in camp. And in winter, we're back in the cities with a whole bunch of materials that we've gathered. And then we do our value-added processing while we celebrate and while the city welcomes us. So this would be an opportunity of almost like creating dormitory warehouses. And one thing that we have now, a couple of things here. Why is the Great Recession different from the Great Depression? In the Great Depression, everybody was standing in lines for waiting for help, looking for jobs. And while they were standing in lines, organizers, not activists, organizers walked up and down the lines and talked to everybody. And then people talked to each other. Nobody's standing in lines anymore. They're doing this online. They're doing this in the computer. What's going on? The second thing is, so our communities of people who are in trouble are not talking to each other. And during the Depression, the Great Depression, there was a tremendous amount of community discussion. And that put pressure on President Roosevelt to save capitalism. And there is no such pressure on Obama, because our communities are not coming together until on Wall Street. Let's see where this goes. The other way that the Great Recession is different from the Great Depression is we are now overbuilt. In fact, even Obama is talking about tearing down a fourth of the housing in the United States. If you heard about this, get out the bulldozers and tear down all the houses. But that's just the houses. The commercial real estate is gigantically overbuilt. Empty factories, empty warehouses, empty offices, empty shopping centers. And all of that can be repurposed. It just takes cities forming city banks, seizing tax properties, taxing absentee landowners, and creating city chartered co-ops. All of these things have been done. New York City, for example, has a long history of some of these ideas. And the state of North Dakota is a state bank, and it escaped the recession because of this state bank. So there's a lot of stuff out there, okay? And I'm trying to deliver my research here and give you a heads up, right? That, look, there's these things we can do. And And there's these things we can talk about what our opportunities are, so that we end up with single-payer health care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the way to get there is not by pushing it. It's by taking a deep breath and being willing to talk to anybody. So let's open our hearts. Let's get excited about the future. Let's think about what tricks we have in the bag. And let's clump.